Welcome to the Dirty Verdict Podcast, where your hosts, trial lawyers Kyle Herbert and Bill Ogden, and mediator Peter Taaffe talk with interesting lawyers and break down recent legal news in detail. Here's Kyle, Bill, and Peter.
All right, welcome back to another edition of the Dirty Verdict Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Peter Taaffe.
I'm Kyle Herbert.
And I'm Bill Ogden, and our motto here is we're not sisters by blood, but sisters by heart.
That's right, Bill.
And Kyle's is See You Later Litigator.
That's right.
And mine is Lexitas.
Oh, wow, we're giving free sponsorships now. Okay, Pete. We could have gotten, that was like a $10,000 thing you just shouted out.
Coffee tastes so good.
To the millions of listeners.
If anybody wants to spend $10,000 worth of advertising on the Dirty Verdict, call us. We'd be happy to have you.
Kyle needs more sport coats.
So this week, we are going to do our level best to break down the recent Ken Paxton impeachment drama.
The most historic trial in the history of the state of Texas since 1902.
Freaking.
According to one of our prior guests, that was the case, who we've obviously interviewed, the lead lawyer and now the winning lawyer for Ken Paxton. So we're going to break down kind of what we did. We all watched it at various, not 100% because we have day jobs. But all of us watched quite a bit of it, traded a lot of texts and calls about it. So I'll lead the discussion. Overall, Bill, your view of the lawyers in the case.
So I will start with the elephant in the room, which is, if anybody wants to know, I love Rusty Hardin. Just say that. And I have a lot of respect for him. But the "we rest" kind of stuck out, And so I've seen a lot of memes.
Your Honor, at this time, the House of Managers rest.
On the internet now of like, anybody wondering where Rusty is, he's probably resting. I thought Dick DeGuerin and Rusty did what they do. I thought a good friend of mine, Daniel Duco, was part of the prosecution team. I thought he did a fantastic job.
He was pretty much the only one operating when the defense or the Paxton team put on their witnesses. I felt like he was the only one that was crossing them. Was that?
Yeah, kind of. I think so. I never really paid attention to that, but I thought Daniel did a great job. I messaged him on and said like, hey, I was almost impressed. But I thought he did a great job. And
Aaron Epley, people seem to be very pro Aaron Epley.
I thought Tony lived up to who we all thought and know who Tony was. And I thought Dan did what Dan does. Dan Cogdell, yeah. And Dan Cogdell's resume already spoke for itself. And so what he did there is he tries the case in a very unorthodox way, in a way that not many lawyers, if any, can do. At one point, he kind of told like a sex joke, a dick joke.
Much time, Your Honor? 1.5 minutes. I would make a joke about my personal life, but I won't.
Yeah. And not the 1.5 minutes.
Yeah. And, but I really was impressed with Oso. Is that his name? Oso?
Anthony
Oso. I was pretty impressed with his delivery, his look. He seemed prepared. He controlled his witnesses. I was very impressed with him as well.
The ladies seem to be impressed with him.
I can imagine that. He's a good-looking guy. I'm comfortable enough with my sexuality to say like he's a great-looking guy. And he's I thought he did a fantastic job. At the end of the day, we have a process, and that process ends in justice, and justice was served. Right, Kyle?
Absolutely.
Your views on the lawyers?
I would kind of take a different tack and discuss my views of the non-lawyers. So our lieutenant governor,
judge,
they called him all kinds of different
air quotes.
They called him Mr. President.
Yeah. Well, he's the president of the Senate, I think.
Right. So his real name is Danny Goeb. He now goes by Dan Patrick. He's not a lawyer, not been to law school.
No.
Went to University of Maryland, Camden Yards. Nobody's ever heard of it.
Wait, can we shit on Dan Patrick?
Kyle is warming up to have the property taxes for his 100 block be triple the next couple weeks.
What I found entertaining was watching a former radio host, no disparaging of people that host random shows.
He means you, Pete.
Pretend to try and be a judge when it's clear that he has no idea what hearsay is, no idea what the evidentiary rules are, no idea what's relevant. And for me, it was entertaining to watch both sides struggle with the idea of like, how do we explain basic first principles that any first-year law student would know to a man that has the power to say, case dismissed?
Can you imagine how fucking frustrating it would be if you were a senator who was also a trial lawyer, sitting there watch Dan Paxton just bastardize what they do for a profession?
You just want to put your head in a bucket and scream. And I know from some context that I have that there were lawyers that worked on both sides.
Exclusive.
Who were like, this guy doesn't have the first clue about what he's doing.
His show.
Who was the person that was sitting next to him?
She was an
former criminal judge.
Yeah, and an appellate attorney. And I think she's a practicing appellate attorney now. But she was, I think he had like a little buzzer or something, and they were like, yeah, sustained or overruled.
So there was one point during the trial where one of the lawyers for the prosecution said, what did this case settle for? And the defense said, objection, hearsay. And the prosecution said, those aren't words. That's not a statement.
Nobody's asserting anything.
No one's saying
out of court.
An out of court statement. That is a fact. That is a fact that happened.
Sustained.
And he was like, sustained. And then they asked the exact same question, same objection. And the lawyer said, look, these are not words. These are facts. I can ask questions about facts. And Paxton said, well,
Patrick.
Sorry. Patrick said, look,
Dano.
Weird that I would get Paxton and Patrick confused. But Patrick said, well, I've ruled on this. And look, we all get bad rulings, right? I tell my clients, if we're going to go to trial, some days you win, some days you lose, some days it rains. Judges don't get everything right. But I was entertained by that struggle for all the lawyers. I was entertained by watching Cogdell give his aw shucks Bayou City yokel defense, which, by the way, I'm not criticizing.
No, it's effective.
Yeah, if it works, it works. But if you stand up and make penis jokes in front of the Senate of the United States and you still win,
Or Texas.
Senate
Of the United, you said United States.
Yeah, hey, I guarantee you, Cogdell would do a dick joke in the U.S. Senate as well. And he would own it, and it would work.
That's great. And then Busby gives look, I could have written from memory of watching Busby do other closings. I probably could have written 30% of it.
I was ready to secede after his close.
And been accurate. Like, we're going to talk about me being a Marine. We're going to talk about this poor man who's under attack.
Constitution, freedom, democracy.
Which is great. I wonder two things I'm left questioning. One, if I was sitting down here with the House managers or any of their lawyers or Rusty Hardin, and I said, would you do anything different? What would you do different? And I wonder if their response would be, didn't matter. Wouldn't have mattered either way. And I know that sounds like sour grapes, but I am curious about the things that Dan Patrick has said post-trial, which is kind of classic authoritarian, the jig was up the minute it was filed. When the judge comes out and says, we are going to investigate the prosecutors. And I know the right wants to say, well, it's the Biden crime family. This is Banana Republic nonsense. But when the judge, the afternoon after the verdict is rendered, comes out and says, well, we wrapped that up. Now it's time for us to go and investigate the investigators. That concerns me for democracy. But I'm also curious by the awesomeness of the idea that his son, Ryan,
There's only a son.
was one of the investigators.
That's why it's unbiased.
Right.
He's I will take down my own bloodline.
Right. And I'm waiting for that to happen.
And he's not going after him, Kyle. He's just asking questions.
It's just a Jesus fatherly rebuke to make sure that Ryan understands his role in America.
Well, I think
You mean former U.S. Attorney Ryan Patrick? Ryan Patrick.
That job, not because his dad is who he is.
I don't know. I don't think anyone's independently verify that Ryan Patrick was involved in that?
Yeah, Kyle, in Kyle's opinion, for defamation purposes, is everything he just said.
That he was involved in what?
House investigation. I've heard that.
It's absolutely published. He's one of the 5 House investigators.
Can we just say that the one thing that came from this impeachment was this one, which is just fantastic. And we'll put it up for everybody. It's Tony with the Leonardo DiCaprio from Django with Tony's face on it. It's awesome.
There's plenty of political people. We're a legal podcast. I kind of want to focus on the legal side of it.
Well, we got to talk about Tony, that like one camera, which was the most popular camera in the entire impeachment, making Tony really orange. Right. But then when you see other photos and video of him, he wasn't that orange. Everybody thought he went like on a Trump tan, but it wasn't. It was just one camera.
Is that right?
And then
did they change the lens after day one?
I don't know what it was, but Tony was not that orange. It would have been so much more fun if he was, but he just wasn't. And Tony on social media did make light of it to an extent. So during the weekend of the 2-week trial, over the weekend he was block walking for his campaign, and he's like sticking a sign in the ground, and he's like, we're out here just working on our tan.
And he's very excited about the Tony Busby campaign, and there's nothing funner than walking the neighborhoods when you're taking a break from a busy trial, meeting people that are voters, and working on your tan.
And I was like, hey, I tip my hat to you at least making light of it, because it was funny. And a lot of people texted me too, like, why the fuck is he so orange?
I saw this.
It was just one camera.
Several times. Who won the Paxton trial? A lot of people said Tony Busby.
Yeah, he did. So day one was a lot of texts about why is he orange? Because that was
Trump tan.
And then just on this one camera, I mean, it was everywhere. And then I don't recall the opening. I know that's when kind of Eric, the AV person who is
the shining star of the trial.
Eric Arroyo has worked there for a long time.
Was he in-house?
Yeah.
Okay.
He started at the very entry level at the firm. I spent a lot of time talking with him because I was kind of the guy at the firm that would walk around and talk to people. Fantastic guy. Had the hardest job out there. Stepped up to the plate.
You think it was harder than Tony's job?
Yeah. Yes. I think it's harder than someone coming up to bat in the World Series down by 3 with the bases loaded and 3-2. I mean, this guy is clutch.
All right.
Clutch. So I think Tony kind of on day one wasn't the same kind of fandom at the end. But I think where things turned was his cross-examination of the first witness. I believe his name was Jeff Mateer.
100%. I watched the whole first 2 or 3 days. And I say the whole, I was like pretending to work and just kind of maintaining for a little while. But when it was time for, the House did their open, and then it was time for the defense, they said, oh, hey, Judge, can we get 10 minutes to set up? I thought we were going to get 10 minutes. And they were like, nope, go. And I think that kind of threw him off a little bit. I thought his open was okay. It wasn't what I expected. But when he got done crossing that first witness, I was like, and that's why everybody knows who Tony Busby is, because he slaughtered that man.
Did you, after your meeting, talk to Ken Paxton?
I did not talk to Ken Paxton.
Okay, so
handedly and kind of justifiably. As somebody walking in with a skewed left view of everything that was going on, thinking this is a slam dunk, finally somebody's going to do it, I watched it all, and I truly don't think a lot of hard evidence was put forward on 15 of the 16 that finally went to the Senate.
And before you start, Kyle, that guy was nominated to be a federal judge.
And then he hates trans, apparently. Hates the trans community.
But let's just be honest. I mean, Tony made mincemeat of him. And there are other witnesses that Tony crossed that he did not necessarily make mincemeat of. I mean, he made his points, but they still held their ground. The first witness was not the strongest.
Worst witness they could have started with. Primacy and recency, and they just started off soft.
Yeah, so you guys as trial lawyers comment on that decision by the House managers to bring Mr. Mateer.
I think he was the one that could frame the rest of what they were going to do.
He was there to try and put together the timeline, the course of events. What maybe they didn't anticipate, which I saw almost immediately, is how quickly that guy's soft bullshit core would melt.
Oh, he didn't stand a chance.
And that's kind of, I don't know if the Busby team, Cogdell team, what's it called, the Busby team? Because Cogdell was only allowed to speak when Tony told him to, which is kind of embarrassing for Cogdell.
We'll talk about the division of time during closing.
Well, I was going to say this, like, one of the things that Busby did so well was to bring these witnesses and be like, you love Dan Patrick, don't you? You still wish his agenda, which is doing whatever to the state.
TLR.
You still wish that was still right? So, like, you're kind of watching this, like, bizarre Nuremberg trial where there's no sympathetic witness, at least for me. You're like, these are all kind of bad people.
Yeah.
And then they get up there and they're like, yeah, I mean, I wish Mr. Busby, I wish Mr. Paxton had done it better, but like I still believe that he just believes in his heart. Right? It's just like kind of nuts.
The one I will say this, from the jump, during testimony, outside of openings, we'll put openings aside for both sides. From the time the testimony started going, I knew exactly what how the defense was framing the case. I wasn't 100% sure where the prosecution, how they were gonna frame it all out.
Well, the defense said this is the Bush-Biden crime family,
and they nailed it. And I thought that the most compelling fact that for that theme of this is George P. Bush and his family trying to railroad Paxton out so that he can be is that the day that they went to the FBI, George P. Bush renewed his law license. I thought that was, when I heard that, I was like, oh, that's a fact that not a lot of people knew about. And so that it played into the narrative, and it played well.
To that point, okay, so you guys as trial lawyers, y'all know you pick a jury, you find out as much as you can in a voir dire where you question about these people that you've never seen in your life, most likely until they walk into the panel, into the jury box or jury gallery. And then maybe in a big case, you have a jury questionnaire where you ask some questions may or may not be truthful about. That's all you know about these jurors. And then maybe once they get in the box, you get your 12, you can do some social media looking and to see what's motivating them. In this situation, you've got 30 people that you know everything about what makes them tick. You know what motivates them. You know who motivates them. And so hopefully we'll ask Tony about this when I can interview him. How did that, you're not selling to 12 people that are random off the street that you're learning about in 5 minutes before. These are people you know everything about. So what was your pitch?
I didn't think that they were selling to the senators. They were selling to the senators' constituents.
Yeah.
And I think that this is the first time where you have a trial where you could sell a message to somebody who could, like lobbyists too, who could 100% just go back to these senators mid-trial and talk about it. There wasn't a rule about it. And so I thought that's what made it a little bit different. And so I don't think they pled their case at all to the senators on the defense side. It seemed like they were playing it to the public, and it was effective because everybody, the one rule in politics, the most important rule is I'm here to get reelected.
And so along those lines, and I think one of y'all brought this up, the House managers, which I would call the prosecutors.
As a Murr
was the main guy.
Murr, Leach.
Who instantly, Murr and Leach?
I think Briscoe was on that.
Yep.
Murr and Leach were some of the biggest proponents of the Texas business courts. I didn't realize that until I was reading it.
Really?
I just let it up.
Oh, yeah, it was Leach's bill.
I didn't know. I knew it was Leach. I didn't know Murr. I will say this. I think Murr might be the greatest orator in Texas politics.
Best way.
Orator, speaker. I mean, he is, the way he presents it, he's got his draw, he owns where he's from, and he comes off as a man.
No one.
Well, he did the opening,
just
by all accounts.
And the majority of the closing.
And the closing, that's finally when their case, by most accounts, when their case came together, it was like, oh, that was y'all's point.
I'm going to put the shining star on Daniel Duco. Thought he did great. Thought he was great. But I love how he started.
What was your question, your wind up for the Murr?
Well, so so Busby, who is he appealing to, and who is Murr appealing to? Are they appealing to the same people?
I think Murr and the prosecution were appealing to the senators. I think Busby and Dan and co were appealing to the voters.
Yeah,
and I think that was the most
Twitterverse.
Yeah, and they owned it. I mean, if you looked at Twitter, you had the same people that were always going to be hard left anti-Paxton, but I feel like that mid-vote all went their way because they said there's no evidence of this, and then it was time to get the evidence. They put on
a great way to frame 7 days of testimony, which is evidence, and thousands of pages of documents, which is evidence.
Was it thousands of pages thousands of meaningful pages? They were released, right? But did they? Half of that shit that I saw didn't matter.
Yeah.
The only thing that the only document that stands out to me is the fucking receipts for the shitty counters in Paxton's home, and they had them, and they fucking paid for it.
Knowing what you know now,
according to the trial,
does it make everything the House managers presented seem kind of naive?
I don't know if it means naive. For me, it came off. And don't get me wrong, I'm further left than both of these gentlemen. And probably further left than most people. But for me, the promises that were made were all, once I left it, were all politically motivated. This was a political show trial. And that's how I came off with it. And I was anti-Paxton 5 years ago.
And so I'm not a conspiracy theorist. So
thank God, because I'll come after you.
Yeah, thank you.
Ask Alex.
There's the notion that somehow the Bush cabal was behind this
worked perfectly.
But it does.
You think it's just like chance that George P. Bush just goes and renews his law license after it's been suspended for expired for how many years?
I don't know.
On the day they talked to the FBI.
I could be not.
But hold on.
But I don't. That's.
They didn't bring any evidence.
Well, what does that prove? That the Bushes would prefer to be in power instead of Ken Paxton?
Yes.
Great.
And
but does it disprove that all of the stuff that Paxton did?
Allegedly, he didn't do it. We had a trial.
But which?
Okay, like don't be silly about it. I understand how it plays to the
public.
I
am not pro-Paxton. I'm just. The system had a set of rules. They played within them and they won.
Right. And the point I'm trying to make is,
it was not a good day for Texas.
No. I said that there's a bunch of evidence. And you said, no, there wasn't. And I said, yeah, there was. And you said, but instead of evidence, they said it was the Bushes. And I understand that as a trial tactic.
What evidence are you talking?
The testimony of everybody that went up there and said he did all this stuff to benefit this one guy.
Yeah, but at the same time, so I thought when you frame it like that.
Saying Ken Paxton wanted to have sex with that lady. I'm not saying Ken Paxton wanted free countertops.
I feel like there's a but.
I'm not saying that the Bush-Biden crime family didn't orchestrate.
I don't think the Biden
Ken Paxton having this affair that led to all of these terrible relationships with this lunatic fraudster. I'm just saying I have some questions about whether or not the Bidens and the Bushes were able to coordinate that, because no Bush has won a statewide election in a long time.
I thought he was the railroad commissioner for a little while.
He was, but what evidence besides the fact, which is circumstantial, that Bush activated his license, which, by the way, I didn't see any proof of that.
I didn't either, but I didn't see. I feel like if that was not an actual fact, that would have been rebutted real fucking quick.
How?
By pulling whatever record Tony was citing to prove it in the first place.
Those guys were.
You think he was shooting from a hip? That would have been the most impressive trial tactic of all time if he had the balls to say it, and then nobody questioned it.
Okay, I say right now, he has the balls to say it.
I don't doubt that, but to do it on that stage, which would be extremely embarrassing if that was not a fact. And I think Tony's reputation after this, I see him going into politics.
Because isn't the point you say the crazy thing, and by the time someone disproves that the crazy thing didn't happen, and this is the Alex Jones trial, you say the crazy thing,
you're welcome,
and you let it percolate with your hothouse audience for 3 days, and by the time you disprove it, it doesn't matter.
They couldn't disprove it. They didn't even try.
Well, you don't know that.
No, they didn't try. I watched
for sure. I know that they didn't try.
This when that resting thing came and Tony said they rested, we're done, let's move on. That's when he knew he had the upper hand. He could have said anything, and he would have, in his mind, he would have thought, I've got them so spooked at this point, I could say anything, and they're gonna be too afraid. They're gonna think, oh, if Busby said it, it's true, and he's got it backed up, and if we try to counter, he's gonna have 5 documents up our behind.
I think that
my point is, that thing about George P. Bush could or could not be true, but if Tony had it full, he's like, that's no one's going to disagree.
I think with every vote they had in the House, and all of the House managers, and Rusty and Dick and all of their lawyers, somebody had George P. Bush's number. And that didn't come out at the last second. As soon as that came out, a call or a text was made, and because they could have easily said, Judge, it's not on our witness list, but we're going to call George P. Bush. And they could have sworn him in, and he could say that's not fucking true, but they didn't. And they had a lot of opportunity.
What other evidence, even if that is true, that could be proven, to the end. What is that? How does that show that Bush family was behind this whole impeachment?
It doesn't show that the Bushes are behind it, but it gave them an avenue to have a defense that a Bush family, who there's no question are connected in Texas politics and have been forever, that name has a meaning, and they in the general public, like myself, because I'm ignorant to Texas politics.
What it does is it gives them a bad guy that's not Abbott or Patrick.
It gives the conservatives someone to blame who's a moderate,
who's not
Patrick.
And
right.
If you think this impeachment happened without the approval of Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick, you are insane.
You're rolling in circles.
This whole Bush thing gives them an opportunity to find a boogeyman,
a rhino
that's not Abbott or Patrick.
A rhino.
It's so ironic because the Bushes are now called rhinos, Republican in name only. There is no Republican Party in the state of Texas
without the Bushes.
Ann Richards lost to George W. because she wasn't conservative enough.
No, George.
He started I'm more conservative than that conservative. That was where this all started, was George W. for governor.
No, Big George was the...
Herman Walker.
Yeah, the president.
Herbert.
President.
Yeah,
He is...
Herbert Walker.
This was a Democratic state up until 1961 when John Tower beat William Dollar Bill Blakely.
Oh, Blakely.
And I believe 1961. And that's when Senior Bush and his guys were here. I mean, that is the George Washington of Republicans in the state of Texas.
The artist formerly known as.
Republican in name only tells you the state has come along.
Well, I think if you look at the Republican Party as it sits now versus the principles that George W. Bush stood for as president, I think that is anybody. I mean, same with Mitt Romney. That in today's word, the meaning of the word Republican now, those are Republican in name only for those people like, Marjorie and that guy that was sex trafficking 17-year-olds on a jet, allegedly, Matt something from Florida. Yeah, I knew his name.
Okay, I want to stay, because this is a legal podcast, and not get into the politics as much. Other kind of argue, because here's the thing: if you're a trial lawyer, you have to give a reason why this is happening, not because I did anything wrong or my client did anything wrong, but because there's some ulterior.
There's a straw man.
There's some other thing going on.
Well, there's nothing sexy about. They said this, but here's the other facts.
So you have to give a whole different storyline or mode.
Theme.
So we had Bush. Of course, like I said, that didn't resonate with me. And then the second one was Speaker of the House Dade Phelan. Was drunk on the...
what appeared to be clearly drunk.
Well, I'll say allegedly.
Josh, play that fucking clip right now.
Mr. Campbell sent an amendment. The amendment is acceptable to the author. Is there objection to the opposite amendment? The chair has none. The amendment is adopted.
That or he's having a stroke.
Well, there's a clip 10 minutes after that where he's fine. So you have to play that to be fair to him.
Yeah, we'll be fair.
But it was the idea that somehow Paxton then within 10 minutes calls him to resign, and then 10 minutes later he gets the guy impeached.
That's nuts.
Like very fast.
There's no way he has that kind of power. And the fact that story didn't really resonate with me as a watcher, because we all knew that Paxton had been indicted way before that. Mm-hmm. And so I will say that the House having no hearings and meeting, the House managers that ended up doing the impeachment did 4.5 hours, they said, before they sent for the vote.
No sworn testimony, no cross-examination.
Bad fact for the House. Bad fact.
But
But what do all the Republicans in the House do now? How do they go win their primaries?
They don't. They hope.
They're done.
I mean, so if you take Dan Patrick at his word, and this is my question to you guys, what will be more entertaining? The Paxton circus infidelity fraud trial?
Are you talking about Patrick or Paxton?
Or the Paxton retribution tour?
Oh, the two middle fingers to, the entire Senate. Awesome. I can't wait. It'll be like when Michael Watts beat DOJ and he went on a speaking tour and his like presentation was like, what's wrong with the Department of Justice? It's going to be like that.
No. I'm not talking about performative politics like you are with Michael Watts. I'm talking about the Attorney General of the state of Texas.
The future governor.
Who has already issued subpoenas against judges and police officers. Like, he's going to come after the members of the House that voted for impeachment with subpoenas.
He has every right to.
Yeah. I mean, if you can't trump up some nonsense investigations to destroy your political opponents, are we really even playing at democracy anymore?
If you're going to shoot the king, you better not miss.
No, I love it. I think it's great.
It's great for Democrats.
It's great.
It's like watching this mass civil war.
It's great for our show to watch these statesmen gut each other with tong and hammer. But I mean, I'll tell you, it's going to be great political theater. I mean,
it is. It already is.
I mean, is Paxton going to go after their cell phone records, their banking records? Is he going to send the Texas Rangers out to see what mistresses they might have in their back pocket?
I think that Paxton's probably going to do a little as like a revenge thing, and then I think he's probably going to realize that he's got to get ready to run for governor. He's going to roll Abbott out of office, and I think. You heard it here first.
No offense to handicap.
No, because
out of the office.
I love all handicapped people. So, but I will say, you heard it here first. I think that the next governor, not named Greg Abbott of the state of Texas, will be Ken Paxton. And I think the next attorney general might be Tony Busby.
No way.
Okay, so let me go back. I want to keep this on legal. We watched this. Okay, most lawyers, and clearly a lot of lawyers in this case, have not had to deal with evidentiary objections.
Right. Or if they have, not in a long time.
It was sloppy.
Because
even the greats.
I feel like most lawyers kind of like get to some point in their career where it's like evidentiary objections are kind of dorky. And, hey, us cool trial lawyers, we just do our thing.
Shut up, nerd.
Yeah. And so it's like a mutual attrition kind of thing.
You don't object in my opening, I won't do it to you.
Yeah, I won't do it to you.
Try your case, I'll try mine.
And so, like, I mean, I've watched Tony try tons of cases. I don't think I've heard him object maybe 5 times.
Oh, he objected a lot.
He objected 5 times in like 5 minutes.
It was effective.
Because I felt like the gauntlet got laid down at some point where it's like, oh, you're going to object to me? Okay, I'm going to object to you.
And when you know the judge does not know how to rule,
it's even better.
Would you ever stop objecting?
Yeah.
My mock trial
leading, that annoys the fuck out of me.
One knows what leading, or he doesn't.
Even if he was leading, it's like, you did go there, right? Oh, objection, leading. When'd you go there? They're like, that's it.
Yeah.
So my mock trial coaches would tell me a sustained objection means get the next one ready.
Yep.
You keep going.
So leading, by definition, is only when the question insists on only one answer.
Yeah.
Right.
It is not when the question
is a yes or no. Correct. It has to imply the answer.
And that is lost on the presiding officer over this.
The fact that you called him an officer is a stretch, and that's the most liberal use of the word officer I've ever heard.
Second, I will give the presiding officer credit. He mastered the move along.
So, right,
move along.
And it takes some big cojones for the lawyer to go.
Rusty said, is that it? Rusty said, is that sustained? Like, he said it a couple times. I was like, ooh, careful. Yeah. Make him look bad.
Because that's when you step up your game on a judge.
Because you can't make him look bad because he has two people whispering in his ear how to do his job.
Right. Yeah. I will say this. There was no hiding that Dan Patrick was
Totally
just
lost.
parroting whatever they were saying. Because he's like, objection, ask and answer. He's like, sustained. It was very obvious. Which actually, I don't think anyone objected to asked and answered at all.
Not that we saw.
I did love the sidebars, the jabs. Rusty and Tony especially. They were the ones that did it the most, which is, I think Rusty, I remember
I've
him
gone
saying,
all these years without needing Mr. Busby's advice. I'll do one more question and see how far I was great.
Yeah, Judge, I think I've done okay not needing Mr. Busby's advice my entire 42-year career. I think I can get one more question in without needing it. Something like that.
I'll up here for some more people.
And they had, and like Tony did it back. Like the jabs were awesome for political theater, not for trial. That would never go down in a courtroom. The lawyers would never talk to each other. But to get to see,
they would, but a judge would
destroy
it very early.
Yeah, the objection would be objection sidebar sustained, and we would get back to the case. But here they didn't have that, and so the back and forth jabs that they had with each other, I loved because you're seeing two greats do it.
I wonder if Judge Judy would have done a better job.
Judge Judy, University of Miami alum,
or Wapner.
Canes.
Can you get him?
Here, question. We hear from a lot of lawyers, including our most recent guest. Opposing counsel, we go at it, we fight the courtroom, and then afterwards we go have a beer together.
Do they not like each other?
Do you think Tony and Rusty Hardin had a beer together?
So
Tony doesn't drink, as I understand it.
Yeah, Tony's sober. Yeah, or steak, a broiled steak.
No alcohol, Heineken, whatever it is. Do you think they went and shared a drink of?
I
can't imagine they did.
I will go ahead and assume, in my opinion, I can't see Dick doing it. I don't think Dick was going to have drinks with anyone. He looked upset. I can't see Rusty doing it either because there's a picture of them all after the verdict in the back, and Tony's got like a musket, and Dick Aaron is in the background. He's just like,
I don't think Dick
don't
had
look
a good
at
time.
me. I don't think anybody had a great time except Tony when the verdict came down.
I think
and Dan.
Dan.
And Paxton.
Yeah, of course.
He had a fantastic time. He wasn't there.
Paxton's mistress did too. She didn't have to testify.
Question:
Is she going to hold the Bible when he gets sworn in, or do you think it'll be?
She's going to keep it in her Balenciaga bag that she carried to fucking trial. And they were like, she has a $60,000 a year job. How does she afford that $3,500 bag or whatever it was?
So will it be First Lady Angela or First Lady Laura?
I did see some clips of Angela Paxton. That's Kim Paxton's wife, current wife.
Currently.
Yeah. She was blowing kisses to other senators in the gallery. I saw the video, the pictures of it.
Incredibly embarrassing.
Strong woman is what you're trying to say?
Yes.
What is y'all's view on Paxton not being there besides the opening and the close?
Absolutely what I said would happen a month ago.
I thought that it was hilarious that the rule was he had to be there at 9 for openings, which he was for pre-trial.
And then he left.
And he was. And then when openings came, they left. And they're like, he's not even here. And Dan Patrick was like, yeah, he was ordered here. And Tony just goes, Judge, the order said he had to be here at 9, and he was. And he goes, okay. Mr. Busby has a point. Like, he just kind of was like, we didn't read the rule right.
He's in the middle of a massage, Judge. You want me to call him out?
Yeah.
And that's the interesting thing about this for those that want to say there is or is not bias. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But, like, would Mr. Paxton, who is technically required to appear before the Senate as required by his office, never had to appear for trial, never had to give testimony, nor did his most prominent co-conspirator, who's the mistress. He was deemed to be
Nate Paul.
Well, Nate Paul didn't attend.
Why was he not subpoenaed?
But the
I guess he plead the fifth.
But then the mistress was set to be called, and they said she's present but unavailable, which apparently is something that Dan Patrick kind of created out of whole cloth. You are here, but in a ghost sort of nonverbal way, so you can be here but not participating.
And that whole announcement preceded the prosecution accidentally arresting. Like, that was within.
Yeah, that was their big fight.
Well, so Tony moved for directed verdict, and they went back, and then they came out, and I don't know what Rusty moved for, but when they came back from break, it said both sides are removing their motions, and we're going to allow the defense to move forward.
He was trying to say he was resting on the argument about this witness.
I honestly think if I went back and look at it, I've watched it a few times. I honestly think Rusty said, Your Honor, because he says like, Your Honor, the House blah 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 rests, and then Tony's like, and clever of Tony, because he jumps on. He's like, Your Honor, I haven't crossed yet, but I accept that, and by doing that,
for sure,
Patrick's like, You did rest. And I'm like, fuck off, Dan. Nobody cares what you have to say. Like,
every other judge in the world would be like, did you mean to do that? All right, finish calling your witnesses.
You got to give Busby credit.
Oh, for sure.
It was very clever in the moment.
We don't know. Any other judge, state or federal, would be like,
reopens.
Did you mean to do that? No, I was trying to say I was done with this witness. Okay, well, you've got this other witness list. We'll keep going.
Lawyers would have actually let him off the hook under the gentility.
Well, apparently there's a rule in Texas civil procedure where if you rest inadvertently, you can just make a motion to open back up your case, and unless you show some sort of prejudice, it's no big deal.
Yeah, and
I thought that's what was going to happen, and then I realized we didn't adopt the Texas rules of civil procedure
or any rules.
Yeah, the rules are we don't talk about Fight Club.
It's a political question, but my question is this:
so it's a federal court.
What convinced these House investigators, what convinced all these House Republicans that there was any chance of success? And what changed in the middle?
Well, I'll tell you why. 10 hours of deliberating and whatever went on behind closed doors to get those votes to go the other way is what motivated them.
Yeah. It's like a criminal trial. We've talked to criminal lawyers where it's like, if the jury can be convinced, like, I'm not sure that they committed this crime, but they're just a bad person, so we're going to convict them of it just to get them off the streets. And I think that was kind of the hope. Maybe, of course, Busby said in his closing, they hoped he'd resign after they indicted him. They pressure him. And
I think that's silly.
And then once that didn't happen, they were just like, let's just try to make him look like he's a bad guy, and like evidence, schmevidence. Maybe they'll just want to get him out, but it didn't work for them. Okay, last question. There's still 4 articles that were deferred, and I don't believe they have done, and they all relate.
Were they deferred or were they just dismissed on the motion to dismiss?
I'd say I don't know the answer as we see.
No one does. It was behind closed doors.
4 that were deferred because they were part of the securities case that our former guest, Kent Schaefer, is prosecuting. My thought was they said we're deferring that because we're going to see how that criminal case plays out. And if he gets convicted in that, that's a pretty easy.
Well, I think if you're a felon, you lose your right. You lose your ineligibility. You're ineligible anyways.
So I don't.
You don't have to have a law license to be the attorney general.
No, I think if he gets convicted of a felony, he loses his eligibility to be the attorney general.
And so that's just
because you'd be in fucking prison.
So that trial starts what, November?
Yeah. Well, allegedly, it's been it's been
6 years,
decade almost. I think it's been like 7.5.
It's going to be. What do you think the chances that case?
Wait, what county is that in? Isn't it like Tarrant?
Was that right here in Harris County?
It was here. I thought that.
Is it? I thought it was like up in Dallas or something.
It was in Collin County.
Collin, that's what it was.
Paxton moved for a new venue, and they gave him Harris County. And the Supreme Court has been fighting for 6 years about whether or not Harris County is an appropriate venue.
Come on, nasty Nate. What are you doing up there?
I'm just telling you, that will be super fun to watch. I mean, the retribution.
Who's the judge? Do we know who the judge is?
It's probably some visiting judge, but yeah,
it's a criminal judge.
Why? If they moved here, why would they need a visiting judge?
I think it's one of
everything with this case is unique. But does the Nate Paul thing? He's still being investigated. So other shoes could drop in other venues, including the feds.
Al Hamdani, friend of the show.
I think that's out of the Western District, but typically the federal prosecutors, they don't make mistakes.
Yeah. They don't miss when they squeeze the trigger.
Yeah, so
they don't pull it, they squeeze it.
I would think the story has not been fully written.
Well, I will say this. I am in no way, I am probably the furthest person from a Ken Paxton fan when this started. And I thought this would be the most slam dunk, hilarious thing to watch. And I thought it was kind of funny the way that the confidence that Tony gave us when he was talking with us. And then I watched it and I realized when you say that, what about all this evidence? Like, other than testimony that was like, when they cross-examined, it was like, you assume that, right? Yes, you assume that, right? Like, it was all kind of assumption.
But that's the point of a conspiracy and obstruction case. People don't write down, today I am going to accept bribes from my friend Nate Paul.
Yeah, they do.
All of the evidence is in the nature of inference. That's what happens when you have a criminal conspiracy.
Circumstantial.
Right, but circumstantial evidence is still evidence. Because
I agree.
Because people don't sit down and go, today I'm going to go see my mistress because my friend Nate Paul made it easier for me.
But there is no, here's the thing. The fact that they brought a bunch of charges that Tony and Co. and Dan easily debunked. The receipts for the home renovations. What the fuck was that? Why would they even bring that forward? Why wouldn't they just kick that off and focus on the shit that they could prove?
Because here's the point. He didn't pay for months and months and months. And then he finds out, right? He finds out that morning that he's being investigated for it. So then he pays. He tells Nate Paul, don't pay it. I'll go pay it. The evidence is nuanced.
Yeah.
Because you don't write down, today I'm not going to pay my contractor and delay payment for 4 months. Maybe I'll pay him later. And then he finds out he's under investigation for it. He tells Nate Paul, don't worry about it. And then he goes and pays it. I mean,
allegedly. We're not trying to get sued here as a show. Actually, we are trying to get sued.
Yeah, the standard being beyond a reasonable doubt makes, when you say the evidence is nuanced, those two things don't usually.
Yeah. Was this light bulb on? I don't know. It's really hot.
Yeah. So anyhow, I think the bottom line is everyone, at least on Twitter, was very impressed with the defense lawyers, the Paxton lawyers.
I will say, Tony Busby put on a Johnny Manziel clinic. He threw up 2 middle fingers, and then he went out and he backed it up, and I got a lot of respect for it. And I genuinely don't think it was
complete with a literal Uncle Nate.
Yes. Yeah, he had Uncle Nate.
Who is Johnny Manziel's MVP? Uncle Nate.
The artist formerly known as the MVP.
Nate.
Yes.
I think the consensus is the prosecution lawyers, not necessarily, no one's saying they're bad or not talented.
No, they were fantastic, but
it's like they were kind of playing
by the rules.
Yeah, and with a bad set of cards that they
maybe a bad set of jurors.
Yeah, well that.
Well,
and
the problem with this jury is that this jury could be influenced by 2 things. 1, constituents, which are easy to get to now with technology, and 2, with money. We don't know who was offered what behind the scenes, and I don't know if anybody was offered anything, but all of those things are both completely legal and on the table.
We know a lot of communications were made to them. I mean, a lot of the grassroots political people said, "Oh, we're so proud we sent 5,000 messages to."
Sure. So you had guys like Stickland, the head of the Freedom Caucus, out there on Twitter every single fucking day, pounding the horn, saying, "Be respectful. Here are all of the fucking swing votes. If this is you, make a call." And every night he was on Twitter doing it. And
poor Stickland. All of his best
Stickland.
All of his friends are being impeached.
No, they're not. Briscoe was on the impeachment managers committee.
No, but his other buddy, the one who just got impeached.
Yeah, I know.
It's rough for him, man. His 2 best buddies are getting impeached.
You know what they say? It's hard out here for a pimp.
You know what they say? It's hard out here for an intern. Throwing that stink leg.
If y'all were young lawyers and you wanted to,
I'd move to a different state, probably.
You'd recommend watching the buzz cross on the Mateer guy and then the closing?
I wouldn't recommend actually watching any of it. It is so different from the actual practice of law.
It's like watching Suits.
I think I would say this: if I was going to tell a young lawyer to watch anything, watch Busby's close. I would say watch all of the closing. Mm-hmm. Those were masterful. They were well thought out. They played to a particular audience.
I thought the Murr close was really good from a clinical standpoint.
I thought Murr was great every time he opened his mouth. He just didn't do any witnesses. Yeah, I know. But and when you brought up close, is why I kind of gave that sound, is there's an hour or so for close. And
I was going to ask you about that.
And Dan, when Dan got up, had 5 fucking minutes and was like, I thought I was going to have 30. And I was like, Ooh, I don't think Dan.
Like, suck it, Dan.
Yeah, Dan. Tony took 55 of his 30, and so I don't know how they got along after that. I would be pretty fucking upset if I was Dan, but at the end of the day, it worked.
Yeah.
So you can't be mad, and you still got paid the same amount.
All's well that ends well for them.
But I would say if I was going to put on a clinic on pushing the limit in a courtroom during a cross-examination, and I mean really pushing the limit, Tony's cross-examination, I mean, he gutted him. To the point where he had lost all credibility. He had the witness flustered. He was flushed. His color changed. His posture changed. His tone, his cadence, everything changed in that witness from direct to cross. And I think that's what you want out of a cross.
There's a couple of things I would say to lawyers. There were some questions that the guy didn't answer the way Tony wanted him to, but Tony acted like he said exactly what he wanted him to.
Yes.
Yeah. Just keep going.
Yeah. That is what you guys do in trial. That's talent.
Signposting, taking that answer, repeating it in a way that makes it to where you think that's what you wanted. I thought it was great, but I also, with the rules they had in place, Tony and Dan both we haven't even talked about the Texas Ranger.
I liked Dan's cross. I didn't like how I kept going, Ranger.
Well,
Ranger.
so Dan's crossing this Ranger, and this Ranger keeps saying, like, can you say that again? I can't hear you. And Dan goes, is one of your techniques that you've learned over the years testifying to say, I don't know what you're saying, and get me to repeat it to throw me off my game? And he just, in like the sweetest old man look of all time, he's like, maybe. And everyone laughed. Even Dan laughed. And then Dan had to come back with like some like, what came off in my opinion as like kind of manufactured fury. He was like, he kind of came back and tried to get mad about it, but he did it in such a soft way that I was just like, that guy, I like that guy. That's my Texas Ranger.
That's a ballsy move to go after a Texas Ranger.
Yeah.
100%. But Dan's gone after that one.
He's done that a lot.
50 times.
Here was the best part of the trial for me. Busby hoses Cogdell out of his closing, gives him 5 minutes. So Cogdell, being the bigger man, stands up.
Talk about my dick.
And talks shit about Tony for the first 3 minutes of it. Well, I thought I was going to have an hour, and I'm not going to stand up here and start to talk about all the faux rage about these politicians who we all know don't give a shit about any of us. And you're like, that's maybe the most honest thing anybody's said this entire time was Cogdell breaking up with Tony on live television.
I will say that there's nothing that a few cocktails and or club sodas for Tony can't fix in a dark room with a musket after you won the most historic trial that we will ever see.
At least until next year.
The storm of 100 years, they keep telling us every fucking 6 months.
All right, we're going to wrap this one up. So this has been the Dirty Verdicts post-game show for the Paxton impeachment. Hopefully we'll have some other people come on to talk in more detail. But for that,
we're going to have a follow-up once the criminal trial happens.
Yeah, that's true, with people involved. All right, with that, we will close out this edition of the Dirty Verdict podcast. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Bill. Good to see you.
Thanks for joining us this week. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also visit our website at www.dirtyverdict.com. If you are interested in coming on as a guest or have a story idea, please email us at story@dirtyverdict.com.